Now, the first question I want to ask you today is, tell us what it was like coming from Grenada to Canada on the West Indian Domestic Scheme Program back in 1960.
Well, of course, everybody, all my relatives and some of the neighbors, especially the ones with sons, were all going overseas, coming back as professional in some way. And I the world was, I wanted to experience the world. I wanted a little bit more than there was in Grenada. I wanted post-secondary education. So when I was told that Canada was looking for young women who would come to Canada, work for 1 year in the home of a Canadian family, and at the same time get landed immigrant status, so you can stay there and go to school or stay there and work, or you can earn money and then come back home. I think what's important to say is the fact that Canada was very much engaged with the Caribbean as part of that Commonwealth, that colonial experience. If you go back to many of the islands right now, you would see schools that were built with Canadian funds in the 70s and into the 60s and 70s. Canada had gone into multilateral kind of funding and different ways to assist the Caribbean. And so one of the ways was helping to look at some of their social structures. And one was the fact that there were high percentages of young people who were unemployed. And wanting to help with that unemployment situation of young people, that program was set up after World War II, when people were coming back home, soldiers were coming back home. The world of work was now open to women, and women were leaving the families and the homes, going into the work world. And so for Canada, they needed childcare and to address childcare issues and to address the household help for women who wanted to go out into the work world. And so that somehow or the other, whoever the bureaucrats were, both in the Caribbean and in Canada, at the time in Canada, it was called Manpower Canada. They were the ones that looked after labor issues. And so between Manpower and the Caribbean, there was this arrangement that if there were the young girls to assist the Caribbean with young women who were unemployed, that they can come to Canada. If they would work in the home of a Canadian family, families identified by Manpower Canada, that match could be made. The women would work in the home of a Canadian family for 1 year. At the end of that time, they'll get landed immigrant status. That would help the Caribbean by having X number of women get into either further education, become Canadians, or in some way equip themselves so they could go back to the Caribbean. And so I jumped at this. This was my opportunity. I can go to Canada. I can work for 1 year in the home of a Canadian family. I can go to university. I can get myself equipped in some way, and I can come back to Grenada. And so we all signed up, many of us, all of us actually, who were in some way professional. We were either teachers, or we were nurses, or we were public servants, etc. Grenada was allotted 9. There was a quota of some kind. And the smaller islands were allocated X amount, 9 and 11 and whatnot. I think Jamaica got the greatest, had the greatest numbers, and Trinidad. But in any case, I was one of the 9 that were selected in the year 1960. Grenada just didn't want to send their daughters away to work in the home of a Canadian family without preparing them. So they gave us some classes, showing us how to light a stove, what the home of a Canadian family was like, the Canadian money, all the things that you need to know when you get into a new society. And so I'm very thankful that, that somehow or the other, the thinking at the time was not, here we're giving you your brightest young women, etc. They prepared us for that choice that we were making to live in Canadian households.
Now, now that they prepared you, what was it like when you actually arrived?
When we arrived, well, first of all, I went from Grenada to Barbados, and Barbados was almost like the landing stop. The Vincentians, the St. Lucians, the Dominicans, all, these women arrived, and we were all in Barbados for the flight to Canada. So I got to meet some of the young women from the other islands. We were all exchanging, and meeting each other at the same time, very apprehensive about this decision we had made. And actually, and sharing jokes, for example, in my situation, you don't make your own bed, you can't boil water, and you're going to go and work in a Canadian. And so we were sharing, experiences and looking forward to this unknown, this opportunity that we felt that was offered to us. We landed at Pearson, and it was what Canadians said was good weather, but we were freezing. It was the month of June, I think. At the same time, the stares at us, if you can visualize 300 and something young women getting off an aircraft, all Black young women, and walking through Pearson Airport, everybody's looking. I would imagine it wouldn't happen today. They'll say that's a team or that's a whatever. Just looking at all these Black women, we were all dressed in our Caribbean finest, and took us to, we were all cleared, everything. Of course, it was all handled by government officials, etc. So we had no problems, just kind of moving through the airport into transportation, which brought us, took us to the YWCA in downtown Montreal. So we landed in Montreal.
Yeah, Montreal, yes.
Yes, and we were taken to the YWCA in Montreal. That was a joke for me for a long time, because growing up in St. George's, there was a YWCA, and I was a Catholic girl, having gone to Catholic school, had taught in a Catholic, and we were told not to go to the Y in St. George's because they talked about birth control and abortion. And so Catholics didn't go there. It was a door that I knew, but I had never entered. And here I was, my first night in Canada, sleeping at a Y.
Very, very.
That was really, that I thought that was funny. Anyway, the next morning we were taken for breakfast, and they had a huge map of Canada on the wall of this area, and they asked us to choose the part of Canada that we would want to go, that there were families waiting in those different areas. And because the year before, 1959, there were friends who had come and had selected Toronto because there was some connection they had in Toronto. When I had written to them, they said, when they ask you where you want to go, say Toronto. And so I chose Toronto. Other people were choosing, out west, and some chose to stay in Montreal, etc. So there was all the goodbyes and the whatnot as we got into separate trains. I was placed with the others who selected Toronto on a train to Toronto. And we were met in Union Station by the manpower official who took us to a place, and they had lists of the families, their names, the addresses, the telephone number, the number of what that family wanted in terms of someone who can cook or someone who can look after children or so. So they had matched us in some way. And so that family was out there waiting for me. and I was helped to their car, and they took me to their home, and that was the beginning of that 1 year in Canada on this Canada Caribbean domestic scheme.
Arabian vibration.